Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christianson. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it. Hey, Dr. C here with you. Welcome back to another episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. You may know that personal care products often have enough iodine to be a real problem for those with thyroid disease. In fact, back in 2018, the FDA banned iodine from hand sanitizers when there was a lot of problems showing up with healthcare workers. I've talked about which ingredients to look out for, but there's a lot of them. Many of you have said, hey, can you just give me a list of safe products? And the difficulty is that I haven't wanted to do so because they could change. What's in a product today can be different in the coming weeks or months, and I can't keep up with all of them. But I wanted to give you guys a good answer, and so because of that, I've brought a friend on to talk about a new personal care line. This is one that doesn't use iodine-containing ingredients, and the founder's aware of their relevance. She's committed to not adding them in the future. So this is Wellness is the company, and the founder is Katie Wells. She's also the blogger behind Wellness Mama. Katie and I have been friends for a long time, well over a decade. She's got a background in journalism, and she realized that she wasn't getting the answer she needed to her personal health struggles, and she started investigating health topics. Now she's written over 1,500 blogs, 3 books. She was named one of the most 100 influential people in health and wellness. She and I talked before about how iodine in personal care products can be a big issue. In today's discussion, we'll talk through how these personal care products are important to consider, how ingredients in them can be big factors with health, and what are the most important steps you can take to keep yourself safe when putting stuff on your skin. So please enjoy my time with Katie Wells. Hey, Katie, good to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to see you. Thanks so much for having me. It's always such a joy to chat with you.
It is fun to have an excuse to hang out. So people have heard already who you are, what we're up to here. So I'm really curious, what was the first thing that made you think about making some personal care products on your own?
Yeah, actually, this story goes back almost 15 years now. And long before I found you, who I will have lifelong gratitude to her for actually helping me diagnose Hashimoto's, and I've since recovered from it, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And so I was turning to my background in journalism to research and trying anything that I could try in my own life with my own resources that didn't require a doctor to be able to try to figure out what was going on. And one of the things I came across is the idea that we absorb about 60% of what goes on our skin.
60, okay.
60, yeah. And that the average woman will come in contact with over 500 chemicals in her normal personal care routine on a daily basis. And there's a lot of factors that come into play there. Now understanding the thyroid component, of course, iodine is a big component there. For me, in oral care, fluoride became something that I focused on because there can be similar issues with fluoride. But back when I was first reading about this, there were not a lot of natural options when it came to personal care and beauty. Even oral care, there were very limited options, and they either didn't work or tasted terrible. And I've always been, my whole life, an avid DIYer, and I just kept thinking there has to be a better way, and there has to be a way to make versions of these that work as well, that don't taste terrible or that feel terrible on your skin or make your hair greasy. And so it was a long process of just experimentation. I also did a deep dive into oral health, which was probably a 4-year fascination of mine when I got some cavities while I was pregnant. And modern dentistry was told cavities are not reversible, you need to have these filled. And I didn't want to have them filled while I was pregnant. So I started researching and came across the work of people like Dr. Weston A. Price, who looked at these indigenous cultures around the world who didn't have cavities, and then who then moved to more Western societies and developed cavities, and even like the differences in their jaw structure. But what really struck me was that there is an internal component to oral health, and the fat-soluble vitamins and minerals available in our saliva influence our oral health. And so my cavities were very minor. I was actually able to remineralize them through a mixture of dietary changes and then also what I was putting in my mouth. So avoiding things that were going to be counterproductive to remineralizing, making sure I was focusing on fat-soluble vitamins and micronutrients, and then also using homemade oral care products that contained hydroxyapatite, which is the mineral that is naturally occurring in our enamel. And that just kind of was one of the first things that opened my eyes to just how well natural products could work. And with that caveat that so much of health, it starts with the internal. Even things we think of as external, like beauty and oral care, there is a huge internal component to that. And so that just began, like I said, over a decade long fascination. The toothpaste especially was our first product. And
Okay.
I've been
That
through
was the next question.
yeah, I've been through over 100 iterations with that one personally before it even went to the lab to get tested and iterated there. So that one is, I feel like my seventh child almost, because I worked so hard on it, but the reviews are amazing. And I've seen the results in my own family for the last 10 years.
So remineralize, so it's reversing early cavities. I hadn't heard that before. That's really cool.
Yeah, I have since had people on my own podcast and done a deep dive into this because I saw it happen. I actually moved in the middle of that, went to a new dentist, and I was like, I think I have cavities that I need to have filled. And he was like, no, you don't have any cavities. I was like, well, that's strange. But it turns out if it's not a super deep cavity and it's not through the entire enamel layer and all the way into the core of the tooth, you actually can replenish that enamel. And you can also be very proactive by eating a diet that's rich in these nutrients that you need to create a really like optimal saliva. And then simple steps like avoiding the things that are going to break down your enamel. So we hear the very obvious basic ones like the acid and soda, too much sugar from processed foods, but it's so far beyond just that. Most people don't realize the mouth has its own oral microbiome, just like we have a gut microbiome and a skin microbiome, but the oral microbiome interacts very heavily with the gut microbiome. And oral health in general impacts the body so deeply. This is the reason, for instance, if you have a heart condition or certain health conditions, they will give you antibiotics when you get dental work because of that connection with the mouth and the whole body. And we can use this to our advantage when we understand that. But unfortunately, a lot of oral care products either over sanitize the mouth and kill both the good bacteria and the bad bacteria, or kill only one of the bad strains of bacteria. So you typically will see imbalance in one of two directions, either in the direction of strep mutans, which is the cavity causing bacteria, or in the family of gingivitis causing bacteria. And you don't typically get both of those problems at once because they're both opportunistic bacteria and they'll typically outcompete each other. But the solution is not to over sanitize the mouth. It's to, just like you will with the gut, work with that natural microbiome, support the good bacteria through like pre and postbiotics and things that are not going to kill the good bacteria, but support them and let them do the job of keeping the other more opportunistic bacteria in balance.
That's really cool. The 60% number was pretty surprising as far as how much absorption. There's a lot of difference from thing to thing, but overall, we're putting a lot of stuff on all the time, and it's getting into our bodies. Many years ago, when I first got the manuscript for the thyroid reset diet, I talked to you about this, and I talked about how, I realized that so many of these things had iodine, and the number for that particular one was a small number, but the microgram quantities end up being so large that you might not absorb a lot of it by percent, but you still end up with a lot getting into your body. So a lot of these products would have 1 or 2% of an ingredient like PVP, which ends up being 12% iodine. And if you absorb 4% of that, you can still get 2,000 micrograms from a conditioner or something. So it really added up. And I just realized that that's one little narrow thing that I've gotten really deep into, but I know that you've looked at a lot of ingredients besides that, and there's many other things that are quite relevant. What are some other big ones that you found that can probably make a really big difference for people that you've deliberately chosen to avoid that are common ones in personal care products?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And to your point, I think often we don't think as much about what's going on our skin as far as having an impact on our health. People are much more aware now of obviously what we eat impacts our health, but the skin being the largest organ and 60% of what we put on it being potentially absorbed by the body. I often give the example of, like you said, we tend to discount it's just a very small percentage, but someone would take a very small pill of a painkiller and expect it to have a very profound effect. Someone could put a topical patch of nicotine and have a very severe effect from that. And so understanding that, we can then curate what we put on our body. And this was actually a large part of the focus for me with wellness, because when I realized that statistic, I thought, okay, non-toxic should be the baseline. At the very least, we should be avoiding putting directly harmful things on our body. But understanding that statistic, that means we can actually put beneficial things on our body and they will be absorbed by the body and have a beneficial effect in the body. And unfortunately, not many companies tend to take the idea that non-toxic should just be the baseline. But I realized we can then use this to our advantage. So of course, we're going to avoid the big offenders like parabens and artificial sulfates and chemical fragrances and all of the things you would definitely not want to put on your body. But we can also then put things like beneficial herbs and really nutrient-rich butters and oils in our hair, on our skin, in our mouth, and have a beneficial effect from them. And even in now our deodorant, same thing, working with the microbiome of the skin and having a beneficial effect. A lot of people don't realize deodorant's a big offender because it's going on the armpit, which is really close contact with lymph nodes. So not only are you
Hmm.
getting that skin absorption, but you're having a pretty direct lymph effect. And so, of course, you want to avoid the things like aluminum and the really harsh antiperspirants, but also it means you can put beneficial things there and have a positive, almost detoxifying effect on your lymph system at the same time. So we chose to go with everything that was EWG verified as completely safe ingredients, 1 or 2 ratings that essentially are edible. So while they wouldn't taste good, I don't recommend eating any of the products. They are safe. They are that safe that they can go on or in the body.
So this is phenomenal. So you're right. I think that a lot of the presuppositions have been that uh, companies have thought to be distinct by just not having bad stuff. But you're saying that's just where you get started. And I think that's brilliant. No, if you essentially are eating this when you're putting it on, it's not just a matter to avoid bad stuff, but why not be deliberate and choose things that are specific and useful in various ways?
Yeah, and especially with kids, that was the other big focus for me is, like with kids' toothpaste, they come with poison control warnings and they say not to let your child swallow any of it. And if anybody has ever watched a child brush their teeth, they're absolutely going to be swallowing some of it. But when my oldest was just a toddler, we were at a friend's house and the mom was pretty certain her toddler had just eaten a whole tube of toothpaste. And she called the poison control center and they basically told her, well, yeah, you can take him to the hospital and they can try to pump his stomach, but if he ingested that much fluoride, it's not a good scenario. And that's something that most kids are putting in their mouth and getting that microbiome contact with every day. And so I feel like the other thing, whether you use our products or you don't, I would encourage people to take like an 80-20 approach when it comes to the personal care products, because what I realized was while women are encountering those over 500 chemicals in our personal care routine, if you look at the 80-20, 80% of that exposure is coming from 20% of products. And that starts with oral care, hair care, and then things that are going on the skin. And often we're using unnecessary products that are expensive to begin with, or that's where the majority of our chemical exposure is coming from. So if you do nothing else when it comes to personal care and you still want to use the makeup you love and whatever, if you just replace your hair care, oral care, and deodorant, you're going to get a long way toward minimizing that chemical exposure. And I know many people have talked about when it comes to autoimmunity, for instance, that bucket theory of we can put a lot of things in the bucket, whatever they are, but when it reaches that threshold, it's going to overflow, and that's going to be in whatever direction you want. That's one of the theories, at least, of autoimmunity. This helps minimize the amount of things going in your bucket. And so I always tell people, like, if you just need a starting point, I don't care if you make your own, if you use ours, if you use someone else's, just choose safe ones and replace those core products first, and you'll go a long way toward minimizing your exposure.
So oral care, I get that. We're talking about mucous membranes. So what goes there is going to absorb an even higher rate. I've also thought about, at least in terms of the things I looked at for iodine, the things we use in larger physical quantities and that remain on the body. So like lotions or conditioners are things that I thought to be concerned about. And I didn't think as much about like mascara, for example, because there's the volume is smaller and the absorption. I don't know how much contact there is, but talking like milligrams. But yeah, some things you're putting a lot of stuff on various places and you leave it there. And that's the stuff that gets in. So
Yeah, exactly. And especially anywhere that's a sensitive area with, like you said, in the mouth, mucous membranes, in the armpits with lymph nodes, or anything that's going to have, like you said, a longer exposure. So if you're replacing something that's going to sit on your skin for a long time with something beneficial, and that can even be things as simple as like food grade oils can often go on your skin, things like that. This doesn't have to be super complicated. Another one not related strictly to the personal care, but as a little bit of a side tangent, I always encourage people to replace their laundry products with something like Branch Basics or a non-toxic concentrate, because that's another one we don't often think about because we think, we wash it back out of our clothes, it's fine. But that new laundry smell that you often smell is
mhm.
SVOCs. And because this is like a sustained low level exposure, because not only is it touching our skin and having absorption there, but we're also inhaling that for the entire time that we are wearing our clothes, sleeping on our sheets, whatever the case may be. So that's another one of my 80-20 trade outs that makes a big difference in not only your health, but home air quality as well.
Well, that makes sense too in terms of just duration of exposure. You've got a lot of your whole body's contacted and just all the time. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, you're either wearing clothes or you're in your bedding, so you're always there. And what's not physically in contact, you'd be breathing in, so you got multiple routes of exposure. So that makes a lot of sense. So, someone to get started, we talked about oral care, about deodorants. Like, what are the first, like, a few more steps past that? Would someone want to really do to start changing their routine?
Yeah, those would be in that order, like you said, would be my top recommendation. Start with oral care because that's essentially going straight into your body and very directly. Deodorant I would definitely put as second because of the lymph node placement. And then I would put hair and body care kind of as equal below that. And in both of those, like I said, either use our products or use natural products. I just like ours because they have that beneficial component. We think of it almost as like hair food. Like if you're going to have something sitting on or in your hair for a long period of time, why not make it beneficial to your hair? Same with your skin. We have a bar, a body wash bar, but we also are about to release a lotion very soon to
Mm,
tackle that. And like I said, I also
perfect.
think we overuse products. So it can be as simple as simplifying out the extra steps and using fewer products. We try to make everything versatile as well. So like our conditioner doubles as a shaving cream. Our shampoo doubles as a body wash. I feel like that
That's
also reduces
awesome.
waste. And the more we can simplify, the better. That seems, I think, to be a focus in health right now that I'm really appreciative of. But that's kind of the
Well,
triage of the order I put people through.
you're being generous to say use ours or a natural product, and I would say no, don't use a natural product instead of Katie's because the natural ones there's other good stuff out there for sure, but in many cases they'll still have natural ingredients that are really high in iodine, and the amounts do add up in this space. So from the thing that I do know about, I don't want people listening to think that's a good, safe, viable option because it's often not, and that's why I wanted you to come on and talk about your product specifically because I didn't want to just say natural products are okay because in a lot of ways they probably are, but in this thing that I do know about and I worry about, not so much. Do you see any more headway taking place in terms of, I don't know, just how things are regulated or whatnot? For example, like in this niche of mine, in 2018, they stopped allowing iodine to be part of hand sanitizers. And thankfully, that was pre-pandemic, but they were already seeing that in healthcare workers that there was proportionate rates of increased thyroid disease in those that had the most exposure to these topical products. So that was banned right before then. So I know that in a lot of ways that we're slower than other parts of the world, but do you think there are more steps that are on the horizon you're aware of, or what's taking place that way?
I hope so. I think, like most things, it's coming from a grassroots perspective. And I'm so grateful there are people like you who are educating about this because I know at least when I first was learning about this, the general information available online was like, oh, take more iodine if you have thyroid issues. And people are now, largely thanks to your work, aware of this being an issue. It seems like, and I'm very much in the mom world, but it's a mom driven change of when moms become aware of something and they start looking for and choosing products based on that, then that's when we start to see demand shift. And that's kind of also was my hope with wellness as well, is I want to change the demand by making products that are just better and that outperform and also are natural, because that's when the actual shift's going to happen. But it seems like when anything regulatory takes an extremely long time and is so
Yeah.
far behind the actual research and frontline data from people like you who are actually helping people.
I was just thinking about an analogy about people who struggle with changing their diet. And there's certain things that are habits for them. They're used to this, that, or the other. I don't know. I'd love your feedback about this. My impression would be that it would be easier for personal care products, that there's you're not tasting them. So there's that. And there's a certain sense of expectation of performance, but you put a lot of work into that. Are there any other just stumbling blocks that might come up? Are there thoughts about people who are changing over from things they're used to, or
Yeah, that actually was a big motivator for me in choosing the products we created first because I realized I had friends who were very naturally minded who cooked organic and avoided a lot of these big offenders, but they were still using mainstream brand shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, etc. because they worked. And I realized, and I get it, like we're not willing to sacrifice how we look and feel to use natural often, even if that would maybe be a good thing to do. So I realized to help change that, we had to outperform those more conventional options. And so that was my hope with wellness products. But I agree with your point. I think that personal care in general is an easier switch in that when you run out of a product you have, just replace it with a more natural alternative. You're still doing the same actions, the same routine. It's not as big of a change. Same thing with like, I'm a big fan of anything you can do that improves your health while you're sleeping. Like for me, it was having a chili pad on my bed, having darkness in my room. Those require no effort. You're sleeping anyway. You're just getting that added benefit while you're sleeping. So I would say like those kind of things are the easiest because they're no effort. Personal care is almost as easy because it's just that initial switch. And then of course, things like diet and movement do require a little bit more motivation and willpower.
so I don't know about the chili pad at bed. You got to fill me in on this.
This is a company I wish I had discovered when I was pregnant with my kids, but it is basically a cooling mat that goes under your sheet, and it
Oh,
has
chilling. I thought you
chilling
said
pad. Yeah.
chili. Okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it keeps
Sorry.
I'm sure you've seen the studies of that kind of optimal sleeping range, which is in the high
Yeah.
60s. And this allows you to keep your bed cool versus the air in your entire house cool, which is more energy efficient, but game changer for sleep for sure.
I'm thinking about all the cool things you do in the kitchen and stuff, and I'm envisioning like chili powder or something. And that's I've heard about like cayenne in the socks, so I thought there was some other,
Yes, and
yeah.
onions and paper golds.
No, that's great. Any other thoughts to someone else who's just considering changing over and things they might expect, or is there any kind of a process that you'd expect to go through of transition or adapting to the new stuff, or pretty seamless switch? What would you say that way?
I would say for the most part, it's a pretty seamless switch. I feel like the toothpaste is a very seamless switch. The only change in routine I would encourage is for people not to rinse their mouth out after using, because ours has hydroxyapatite,
Mm,
which is that naturally occurring mineral. You actually want that sitting on your teeth while you're sleeping to allow it to interact with your saliva and create that stronger enamel and whiter teeth. So I just encourage people to just spit, but don't rinse your mouth out. But other than that, it should be a very easy switch with oral care. With hair care, because we're feeding the hair versus stripping the hair with detergents, most people don't realize a lot of shampoos are actually detergents. There can be like a 3 or 4 day adjustment period while your hair kind of soaks up those nutrients. And then typically after that, people see amazing results. Switching to a natural deodorant, we were very careful to avoid anything that in ours that caused itching. A lot of people when switching to natural deodorant will have itching problems, which is usually either a pH thing or they're having a sensitivity to an ingredient. So we were very careful on both of those fronts. But one extra thing people can do, and I've written a blog post about this, is an armpit detox. Basically, before switching to a natural deodorant, putting essentially a mask on the armpits that pulls out the accumulated years of antiperspirant and fragrance that are probably in your armpits. If not, you might just notice a little bit of like increase in sweating or weirdness in your armpits while your body starts doing that naturally. So that's kind of a way to speed it up and then switch to the natural deodorant.
that's really cool. So, those are the big points I wanted to cover. I want everyone to know there's some good options. They don't have to really think through and manage every little ingredient. That you've done that. You've spent decades now just figuring out what's safe, what's not, and what works well. And I'm just really happy to share with you as a resource that way. And other thoughts you want people to come away from this with, or?
I guess I would just end on the note of maybe the mindset shift behind it. And this maybe was the slowest part of my journey, because early on, when I was in the acute phase of having a health crisis, it was easy to fall into a place of fear of all the things out there that were going to hurt me and how bad everything was, and to feel afraid. And while it is good to be aware of a lot of those things, and certainly we are facing more of those things that we need to be aware of than we ever have historically, I think the most lasting change happens when that comes from a place of love and nourishment for your body, not being afraid of everything out there that's going to get you. And that was a very slow shift for me. But when I was able to finally get into a place of love and acceptance for myself, it became almost effortless to choose the things that were best for my body and for my kids without the resistance and without the fear. And I think that mindset piece is one I wish I had gotten earlier. So even though we talked about some of these bad things that are present in so many conventional
Right.
products, I just want to end on that mindset note of, choose these things out of a place of love, model them from your kids out of a place of love and nourishing your body the same way you would with all of the nutritional pieces that you talk about and supplementation, and making sure we have all those things dialed in. I know it touches on the realm of woo, but I feel like it's so much more effective when it comes from that place of love and acceptance and nourishment versus fear.
I think that's great. And I just love the idea of, this is an opportunity to feed yourself. You're putting stuff is going in your body anyway. So yeah, don't do bad stuff, but let's think past that. And what's going to be most effective and most useful of all the great things we have available in the natural world? What can we use that way? So that's incredible. So yeah, good to see you, and always respect your work and admire the things that you do with your family and in your kitchen and things you figure out. So glad to share you with the audience this way.
Well, thank you so much for having me. You were so impactful on my journey of life and recovery, and I will be forever grateful for your work. And I'm always happy to be here and have a conversation with you and get to spend time.
We'll look forward to when we can hang out again in person, whenever that is. So yeah, take care of yourself, Katie.
You too.
And everyone else, thanks for being here with us, and see you soon on another episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. Dr. C signing off, and we'll talk real soon. Hey, Dr. Christianson here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. just go to Dr. Alan Christianson on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much, and I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.